The following is a Spirit Street production.
All right. Arizona State, coming into the Big 12 conference, they bring a lot to the table. I know they haven't had a ton of success over the last few years, but in my opinion, and a lot of people's opinion, they are just a diamond in the rough, just kind of a big mountain that's there that just needs to be unleashed. Got some news today. There's a lot of talk about Arizona State NCAA wise. We've got Chris Karpman on today to discuss all that. This is the Big 12 Insiders.
Welcome to the Big 12 Insiders, your Big 12 sports show, presented by Synergy Financial Partners. Now let's go to booming North Texas, home of Studio 73. Here's your host, Brien Hanley.
All right, welcome back to Big 12 Insiders. Again, this is Brien Hanley. We got Chris Karpman here today who covers Arizona State for 24/7. Chris, thanks for taking time out. I know that there's a lot going on today, a lot of news coming out about Arizona State. Let me just ask you just right off the bat, what is kind of the state of the program with the news that has just come out here?
Yeah, so long awaited.
Right.
This process has been going on with the NCAA for 3 years now, since early June, when it became clear that they were looking into recruiting infractions, the Herm Edwards era related to the COVID dead period, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of recruits were involved, more than 30. So this dwarfs the cases of the Michigans and Tennessees and Air Forces in terms of the scope and scale of this. And the NCAA today announced that the process is ongoing with 2 coaches who didn't agree to the bifurcated resolution that it came out today. So the full findings we won't learn for some months. Antonio Pierce, who is we've reported the architect of the recruiting infractions, is one of the 2 coaches that's having his case heard separately by the Committee on Infractions. But today, the NCAA announced that 4 coaches from the school have agreed, without mentioning names, to show cause penalties ranging from 3 to 10 years. And there are additional penalties that are being put on ASU, including recruiting restrictions that will be completed in the next few months. A minor scholarship reduction, only 1 or 2, I believe, for this upcoming year, a probationary period of 4 years, and then a monetary fine. And then I've reported separately that Herm Edwards, who met with the Committee on Infractions, is one of the 4 coaches who has received a show cause penalty of at least 3 years for his involvement. And he's obviously not going to coach again in college football, so that's largely irrelevant, but yet it matters in terms of assigning responsibility for what took place at ASU.
The thing about it is, these show cause penalties, for these coaches, 10 years is an eternity for a coach. And I think that kind of speaks, Chris, to the magnitude of what's going on. Look, we don't have to like the NCAA. They make a lot of horrible decisions. They make a lot of decisions that take forever. We've seen cases like this. I think this is part of the NCAA, trying to get their act together, because a case like this, Chris, in previous years, this might have lasted 6 or 7 years before anything ever came down. So maybe this is them trying to clean it up. But can you speak to the magnitude of actually, without, again, we don't have to name names or anything, but when you get a 10-year or up to 10 years of a show cause penalty, that speaks volumes as to actually what was going on with this recruiting scandal.
Absolutely. And this was really kind of an unprecedented thing that took place. As I said, you have these other cases where it involves a few guys, 1, 2, 3, I think 5 in the Michigan example.
Right.
ASU had basically official visits, quote unquote, during COVID that involved more than 10 recruits on one weekend in a rented home in Paradise Valley, which is an affluent community nearby. And I'm talking about some really high profile 4- and 5-star recruits that were on campus during that week. right in the middle of COVID, before the Pac-12 season even started in 2020 is when a lot of this stuff took place, and then continuing on into the spring of 2021. And so the 2020 ASU football staff and then a lot of the coaches still with the program in 2021 participated in this. A majority of them participated, including Zach Hill, the offensive coordinator, Prentice Gill, who was a receivers coach. Chris Hawkins was the secondary coach. All of them lost their jobs, either were fired or resigned as a result of this. Adam Brenneman, the tight ends coach. So all of them were responsible for what took place under the direction of Antonio Pierce and or Herm Edwards. The 10-year show cause penalties, I think, are going to go to the people that were most involved on the day-to-day basis of facilitating a lot of what went down at ASU.
Right.
And those people, primarily Chris Hawkins and Prentice Gill, are in the crosshairs of the most severe punishments. And they were both these ascendant coaches in the college ranks that a lot of people knew, and their careers have been upended dramatically, if not even perhaps ended at the college level as a result of this. Like, they're not going to be coaching again for a very, very long time in college football. And they're young guys. They came to ASU before they were even 30 years old.
Wow. Here's the thing. And you know, usually when stories like this break, the first thing that they always take the devil's advocate to this. So I'm going to ask you, Chris, the infractions that were committed and that they're being punished for, are any of these things deemed legal now?
Some are legal now, but most are not. And that's primarily because it was during a dead period for all schools. So there wasn't allowed any in-person communication, interactions or any of those things. There also were the facilitating of some of these visits. So one of the former ASU staffers paid for the airline flight of a prospect to come visit. And then they basically hosted the recruit. There was all kinds of activities on and off campus. And so that stuff still wouldn't be allowed. Now, of course, the landscape has changed, to your point, so much with NIL and what all these people who represent schools and collectives effectively are allowed to do, that in some ways it kind of dwarfs what ASU's coaches did in terms of the ability for collectives to negotiate directly with prospects to try to induce them to come to schools and things of that nature, right? Like it's a totally different world now versus just 3 years ago, but that doesn't change what the rules were and the paradigm in which all schools were expected to operate at that time. Right. And so that's why you kind of have to accept it as what it is.
Gotcha. I mean, with all of this blowing up literally here within the last hour or so, I mean, it's all fresh. I would guess that it's probably pretty hard at this particular moment to kind of gauge where the program is and what the next step is. Have they announced anything as far as because look, transfer portal, look, we're all human. We know what's going on. The transfer portal literally just opened, got some bad news with quarterback, leaving just yesterday. Is there any worry, and I guess maybe we don't know yet, but I'll still ask you, is there any worry that there might be another mass exodus because, hey, we're about to go on probation. We may not even be able to play in a bowl game this year. Any talk of that as of yet?
Well, so there's not going to be another postseason ban. The postseason ban that took place in 2023 is the only one.
Gotcha.
And also there's not going to be recruiting restrictions that go beyond August 1st at all. And there's only going to be 1 or 2 scholarships reduced from this year's team. So actually the reality is, Brien, the punishments that ASU's already incurred over the last 3 years from the specter of this investigation and the people not knowing what was going to happen and the postseason ban and, the recruiting restrictions that ASU already self-imposed, those are the vast majority of the sanctions that occurred. The probationary period is more related to what would happen if any additional violations take place during that period of time. So
Gotcha.
in the next 4 years, if this current staff commits additional recruiting violations, then it becomes aggravated in terms of whatever punishments would happen from that. So this staff has to be very smart and savvy and not do things that are, going to get them in trouble in any kind of a way. But if they're able to do that, navigate that 4-year period successfully, there probably won't be too many additional ramifications as a result of what has taken place. So it's more just an announcement of what's kind of already happened, I would say.
Gotcha. Well, here's what I would say about that, Chris. I know it's bad news for Arizona State fans because, it's bad publicity. But at the same time, I think it's good news because whatever has already happened or what was going to happen, it's already taken place. And it sounds like the NCAA went out of its way, again, doing something that makes sense, punishing the people that are actually responsible versus punishing kids that, hey, I just came to school here. How am I being punished for something that I was a sophomore in high school? I wasn't even at the school. Why are you punishing me? So I agree on that part. Again, I know it's bad news, on one front, because again, it's bad publicity. However, looking at it moving forward and just having that type of lens, I don't think it's that bad of a deal. Just put it out there in public. This is what happened. This is how we're being punished. And now we're moving forward and, the worst is behind us. I guess that's kind of the way to look at it if you're an ASU fan.
I agree. And really ASU made some mistakes because Ray Anderson, the former athletic director, was sort of trying to protect and preserve Herm Edwards' tenure. And so they could have fired Herm Edwards earlier for cause. They could have not paid him $4.4 million to go away. They could have taken their bowl ban, postseason ban, a year earlier in 2022, but they didn't. So ASU also made some mistakes that sort of elongated this process. Like they could have taken a lot more self-imposed restrictions much earlier on. But the NCAA wasn't trying to punish ASU moving forward. It just happens that because of the sprawling nature of this case involving 30 more kids, you have a lot of interviews, you have a lot of coaches, you have a lot of lawyers, you have a lot of stuff that takes a long time. And really, it was ASU staff members that dimed on themselves. This all stemmed from disagreements internally with ASU's football staff, which led to anonymous emails being given from people who worked at ASU with evidence of cheating that also was submitted to the NCAA in June of 2021. So that led to everything that's happened over this 3-year period. And unfortunately, the process did take a long time, but I think that the damage is almost entirely behind ASU at this point.
Well, like I said, that's a good thing. Like bad publicity, I get it. Not necessarily the greatest day, but you know what? If it's behind you, they just put it out there in front of you. I think looking at it from the outside looking in, let's just move forward and keep it moving. It could have been worse. I guess that's one thing to look at it as. It could have been worse, and it wasn't. But I know I had you on before, Chris, and we talked about the previous athletic director and Herm Edwards. That was just an absolute nightmare. Both of us, I can remember the conversation. We couldn't believe some of the stuff that they were doing. He was saying, it's just, you know what? But it sounds like things are on a little bit more solid ground. We're going to take a quick break here. We'll be back on the other side of this, and we will talk some good stuff about ASU and talk about some football-related activities once we have a word from our sponsors, Synergy Financial Partners.
At Synergy Financial Partners, the mission is to change the way Americans plan for their financial future. Synergy doesn't just offer you a financial plan. At Synergy, the goal is to help you find your best financial future. Learn more at synergyfinancial.com.
Welcome back to the show. Let's head back to the studio.
All right. Welcome back to Big 12 Insiders. Again, this is Brien Hanley with Chris Karpman here from 24/7 ASU. So here's the thing, Chris. Just taking a look at the football roster. with transfer portal in, out, people coming in and out, what does the roster, where are they looking to rebuild as of now? I mean, are they done? Are they still looking, because the portal just opened, are they still looking to add some spaces? And with spring ball and all that stuff, you know, what's going on with the roster right now?
Yeah, so they've done a really good job actually of rebuilding their roster. I think the additions that they've made via the transfer portal in the winter period have boosted, I would say, the team at most positions. I think they're going to be better at most spots. And that's even with losing some really key players from last season's team, Deshaun Mallory, BJ Green, Trey Brown. They lost several defensive backs. But really, I feel like they've upgraded at a lot of spots. And when I look at the roster, other than quarterback, because of the Jaden Rashada departure or pending departure, leaving ASU with just 2 scholarship quarterbacks, Sam Levitt and Trenton Bourget. Other than quarterback, there really isn't a lot that's needed in the spring period, which is a very positive thing. Like, of course, you can get better at a few spots. Right? We know that. So if they happen to come across some guys that aren't going to cost an arm and a leg in NIL that can help them at left tackle or maybe another pass rusher, I think they would probably do that. They could probably use another tight end. They only have 3 spring tight ends on scholarship. They're adding a 4th who's highly regarded, Jaden Fortier from Oregon, but he had an ACL injury in high school that he's recovering from. Quarterback is really the main thing. Now, Levitt has really improved, I would say, from the beginning of spring ball through the team's 11th practice, which we watched yesterday. We've been able to see all the practices are open at ASU. It's a very user-friendly thing for media to really get an understanding of what the team looks like. And Levitt has, I would say, made pretty significant improvements. In fact, Jaden Rashada, his decision to transfer, I think, in part is because he knew that he was behind. He had a hand injury that required surgery to repair a tendon in his thumb. And so he hasn't been able to do any 11-on-11s until the last couple practices. And so he's seeing somebody that was in his same class, Sam Levitt, who now has a little bit of an edge on him, I would say. And that contributed to his, I think, decision to decide to look at other places. And he's going to go somewhere where he probably won't start this year anyways, but the difference is that he won't be in the same class or maybe one class behind somebody who was the strongest competition for him to start. And so I would say that if ASU has the ability to find a senior quarterback, somebody who's played and has experience, that would be a smart thing to add as another competition element. Quarterback's the most important position on the field. But when I watch ASU's team this year, they're loaded at receiver, and they have to keep everybody. Keep in mind, there's another week and a half of the portal or whatever. They have to keep everybody. But they're loaded at receiver. They're very good at running back. Their secondary looks to be improved. Their linebacker position is probably improved. And their offensive line is much deeper than it was a year ago. We're talking like 9 or 10 deep now, legitimately, based upon these transfer additions that they've had. And so they have a chance, I think, if the quarterback play is at least solid to pretty good, to be a bowl-eligible team this year. Maybe even if the quarterback position ends up being better than expected, maybe a 7 or 8 win type of a team.
Gotcha. So with spring ball, it's winding down. Obviously they had, the transfer portal is open, but are they looking, or I guess a better question, with the roster the way that it's set right now, obviously, like you mentioned, they got to keep guys. Are there position battles that are currently going on this spring? Is that how ASU does it? Or is it more of fundamentals? We're just trying to get guys better, or is it a common, obviously every practice, somebody's trying to get better. That's every coach will tell you that. But also there's a lot more emphasis on, battle it out. Every position's wide open. Go win a job. Or are we trying to just develop fundamentals and get guys better?
So I think they've done 2 things that are strategically smart with their spring football. Number one is they had it much later than normal, which then allows them to have a lack of certainty about where guys exactly stand on the depth chart go through the entire portal window. And then the other thing that they've done, which is smart, is they've divided their groups not based upon a depth chart, but to give competitive depth through their first and second units. So it's a mix of starters.
Yeah.
So guys don't really know exactly where they stand on a depth chart because there's no official depth chart. It's just these guys are with the ones, the first, team that we see in practices every day. And then these guys are with the twos, but some of the guys who are going to be starters are with the twos. And so it makes it difficult to know where you exactly stand in some of these position battles. They are deep. Like if you look at receiver, for example, they have Elijah Badger, Troy O'Meary, Jordan Tyson has looked really good. Jake Smith has looked really good. Melquan Stovall is the returning slot receiver. So you go, they have 5 guys who could be starters, right? And actually, I literally cannot tell you, other than Badger, because he's, a returning guy who has had, a top 5 season in the Pac-12. Sure. And other than Badger, I can't tell you who else is exactly going to start, and not because it's just because they all have done a good job and look good, and some are with one group and some are with the other group. And I think that intentionally they've tried to prevent players from having a clear understanding, I'm going to be a starter, and so I want to stay at ASU. And that's, to me, in this day and age, that's actually a pretty savvy move. And what it also does is it allows younger players to get a lot of competitive reps with the ones and twos in a way that allows them to feel like they're still invested in competing for spots. Yeah. So, around the country, all schools are going to have guys enter the portal. One of the best things that's happened for ASU is we're 4 days into the portal. Jaden Rashada is the only person who was on the team last year who's entered the portal. So probably ASU is not going to lose a bunch of guys. They're going to lose a few, I'm sure. Some of it will be at the bottom of their roster, guys who understand, okay, I'm not with either of these first 2 groups. I'm on the 3rd group, but I'm a 3rd-year player or a 4th-year player. Right. So the writing is very on the wall for me that I'm not going to be able to play here. I should move down a level. But that's something that ASU staff, like all staffs, will hope to happen because it frees up a few spots, because right now they're already maxed out on their spots when you project the freshmen who are going to be coming in this summer. They're already capped at 85. So they actually need a few guys that are more at the bottom of their roster to depart in order to fill in a few of these spots that I talked about where they could probably improve the roster. Tight end, maybe a tackle, maybe another pass rusher, quarterback.
Gotcha. I mean, in general managership in college football these days, or just college athletic these days, it's just absolutely wild. We can dislike it all we want, Chris, but it's here. So I think a lot of coaches have adapted to it. I do love the fact, and I think there's other places around the country, they knew when the portal was coming, they knew that date, and they have pushed spring ball back. Now, some ended right before it started, some are ending this weekend. But yeah, I love the fact that ASU they pushed it back to where, look, if you want to leave, great, but we're right in the middle of spring practice. What's that going to look like if you leave right in the middle? Just for another coach. Why would another coach, you're looking at a guy that, man, this guy doesn't even want to compete right in the middle of practice. Do we really want that guy? And if you're willing to leave, you know what? We didn't need that guy. So I like that approach to it. Taking a look, before I get you out of here, taking a look at ASU's schedule. Tough games right off the bat. I mean, their schedule doesn't really do them any favors. I know people are going to look at Texas State and think, oh, it's Texas State. I think they got a decent ball club because that's a school that has gotten a ton of Power 5 transfers. But just looking at their schedule, the beginning, it's a little rough, but I think it's manageable. And what you said earlier kind of resonates with me, Chris. 7 wins is not out of the question. It's just not. With the roster that they have, I think people think they look at Arizona State's record from last year and think, they're not going to be as good. I think that's a mistake. I think, number one, I think they were playing their best football near the end of the year. That's number one. And number two, I just think the roster and what they have coming back and what they've put together, I think minimum 7 wins. Now, I'm not trying to put pressure or anything on there. I just believe that it's a roster that can win at least 7 games.
Well, a few things. So last year, their team was so wrecked by injuries on the offensive line and at quarterback. They had their
Right.
fourth string quarterback playing by the third game of the season. That's almost unheard of.
Right.
They traveled to Utah with 7 offensive linemen on scholarship, and 2 of them were redshirting. So they didn't have a chance because they were using the swinging gate, and they had to adjust their whole offensive approach because they had no offensive line and protection. So, and then on top of that, Brien Ward's defense over the years has been great at generating turnovers, and it didn't happen last year for whatever reason. It was very anomalous. It was odd. ASU was at the bottom of the country in turnover margin for most of the year. That's not going to happen year over year at ASU. So I think they were unlucky with injuries. They were unlucky with turnover margin, and now they are also in the second year of installing their schemes, and players have a much better understanding of what they're doing. They have an older, more veteran group because they've added a bunch of additional transfers to supplement their roster at a variety of positions. Mm-hmm. It's hard. I've done this a long time. It's hard to calibrate where ASU stacks up in the spring compared to other Big 12 schools because, of course, everyone is now benefiting from the portal and the ability to get a bunch of transfers in the winter period. That makes it difficult. But just measuring this ASU roster versus what I've seen the last 20 years, it's at worst average in that span. And ASU's had a vast majority of its seasons in which it won at least 6 games. So the schedule is not that difficult relative to what ASU is accustomed to in the Pac-12. Remember, ASU played Washington better than almost anybody in the country, probably better than anyone in the country last year. Yep. And so this, I'm telling you, with the explosiveness at the skill positions and with what Brien Ward does creatively to generate a lot of pressure and do well in the back end of the defense, it's going to be in a lot of competitive games, no doubt about it.
Absolutely. Well, look, Chris, thank you for taking the time. I know you are super busy, so thank you for giving us the time today. I'll let you get back to it. I appreciate it. We'll have you back as many times as you can be on. So we'll take one quick final break here and have a word from our sponsor, Synergy Financial, and we will end the show.
Thanks, Brien.
At Synergy Financial Partners, the vision is to build the world's largest consumer financial education and empowerment company. Synergy doesn't just offer you a financial plan. At Synergy, the goal is to help you find your best financial future. Learn more at synergyfinancial.com.
Welcome back to the show. Let's head back to the studio.
Yeah, that's a lot. We appreciate Chris for taking the time. Look, anytime breaking news like that happens, and they give us time on Big 12 Insiders, we appreciate that. A lot going on. But like I said, ASU fans, it seems like it's bad news, and it is. Don't get me wrong. But it looks like that the punishment, they punished the people that needed to be punished. ASU's already taken the hit, and it's time to move forward. Yeah, the news came out and all that good stuff, and it's not great. But at the same time, if there's no new punishment, it kind of is what it is. So I think ASU has a good year. I know there was some trepidation, and the previous athletic director said some stuff about the Big 12 conference and all that. All that's behind it. I think ASU is a welcome addition. I think it's a good addition to the conference. Can't wait for them to start competing in this conference and just basically everybody growing together. So appreciate your time. Look, thank you guys as always. We're still growing. We're still out there growing. We appreciate everybody that tunes in. Again, Tuesday through Friday, 1 p.m. Central Time. We're live on YouTube. But even if you can't catch it live, make sure you catch it afterwards. Tell your buddies, tell your friends, tell everybody about us. Remember, like, subscribe, leave the comments. More importantly, hit the notification bell on YouTube to make sure that you know when we come on. We will be back next week. Everybody have a nice, safe, and fun weekend.
This has been a Spirit Street production. Please support this show by subscribing to this YouTube channel or follow us on your favorite podcast platform.